Good morning, traders. Welcome to today's market review. This is Fed Razak at CMTrading. Today is March 22nd, 2023, and today is Wednesday morning. So looking at the highlights of the day, of course, the markets are steady and unchanged right before the major FOMC rate decision later today. So talking about that, the major economic events of today, so it's scheduled for 8 p.m. South African time. It's not just the rate statement that's going to be important, but also some of the comments that the Fed will make that will impact the markets. Now, looking at the various markets going into this number, in terms of the Forex symbols, they're all steady, really much unchanged right before this number. As we look at the indices, the NASDAQ readies itself at resistance, while the Dow Jones did break out higher and steady gains. Now, looking at commodities, gold unchanged, while oil bounces to $69 a barrel. And looking at the stocks, Apple and Tesla have some nice gains. Lastly, looking at cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin inches higher. So let's take a look at the markets and see what we can expect from today's trading. So here we go. We're going to take a look at the Euro USD first, and it has some steady gains here, okay? Steady because it's coming closer to its high of 110, but not there yet. We're at 107. For all intents and purposes, we're right there at resistance-ish area, just hovering around it before this number comes out. Now, as we look at the other major markets, nothing really to jump out of, okay? Everything is just really in tandem on a daily chart of the GBP USD. You can see that we are at the top of the range, okay? So there has been some slight gains there just from this early morning trading, but realize we're going into a big number today. So is this like a setup for a later sell-off? Perhaps. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're looking at that today. And lastly, looking at the Canadian dollar, not as strong, okay, as I would have thought it for it to be. And this is partially because of the weakness of oil. Now, jumping into commodities, and speaking of which, gold retracing and staying just steady at 1943 after selling off from that 2000 level, but it's still steady. Okay, so I wouldn't rule this out as, making a complete correction on the downside. However, looking at crude oil, look at that. Nice bounce back to $69 a barrel. Now, we are hitting resistance-ish area, okay? At least in the interim, we're looking at that, okay? There is a major resistance at 72, but $70 a barrel is psychologically a resistance level, so you do want to know about it. And so we're inching closer to that. So I do imagine that we'll falter here around this number. Now, looking at the U.S. market, starting out with the Dow Jones, nice gains past that 32,500 and used it as support, and we're just hovering at 32,732. Today's going to be a very telling sign, because if there's any upwards momentum, which we can have, we could be back at that 34,300-ish level. And if we look at a weekly, it's not as bad as we thought it was, okay? There is some resiliency to the market, at least in the short term, as we've seen this inch a little bit higher. Now, looking at the NASDAQ, not as strong, whereas would have thought that it would be strong. It would be somewhere in the 13,600-ish level, and it's faltering here. It's just stalling at resistance. If we look at the particular stocks, like Apple, pushing higher. Okay, so I would have imagined that it would have pushed the markets higher. So this is having a little bit of discrepancy in the market right now. And that means one or two things. Either Apple's going to correct itself, or the indices are going to correct themselves and they're going to play catch up. So that is something to look at. And this is really a great trading opportunity when this does happen. Now, looking at the other major stock, Tesla, gaining nicely over the last couple of days. You could see that nice gap up and a gap and go to 197. Well, Google's still very strong here. 105 is still very resilient. Still trading in a range, but on its top of the range. Okay, that's another one that's been very strong. Now, lastly, looking at Bitcoin on 28,000, holding its gains and steady. I like this. If it does break out higher, if it breaks 30, that we could go much, much higher here. Okay, now we've discussed this the other day where we looked at this moving average of the 200-day moving average, which we broke. And so the next real resistance at 31,000. Okay, believe it or not, who would have thought that this would make this type of comeback in such a short period of time? Okay, I don't want to celebrate it so quickly because it's not followed up with volume. So it has to really prove itself that it can continue this momentum on the upside. Today's FOMC rate statement, I can't emphasize this enough. It's going to be volatile. There are going to be erratic moves in the markets. If you are in a position already and you are in margin, make sure to add more money to your account or close the position so that you don't get stopped out. Those of you who are brave to trade this type of market, okay, and I do call you brave, anybody that's trading that type of market, you have to be brave. It's going to be volatile, so make sure you have stop losses and take profits in place. This is Fred Razak. I wish you guys a great trading day. Thank you.